I'm Jonathan. Welcome to my scary stories. A chilling tale, The Dark Path of Anna Maria Hahn. In the ominous year of 1938, a German woman named Anna Maria Hahn from the Bavarian town of Fussen became the first woman to be executed in the state of Ohio. She squandered her money on horse racing, and as her gambling debts mounted, she devised a sinister plan. Gaining the trust of lonely, elderly men, she would then murder at least 4 of them in cold blood. Mysterious circumstances. On a stormy night, the doctors at Memorial Hospital in Colorado Springs, Colorado, urgently called the local police for assistance. Georg Abendorfer had sought medical help on July 30, 1937, complaining of severe nausea. The medical team was baffled by his intense symptoms and could find no explanation. None of the treatments worked. 2 days later, on August 1, 1937, the 67-year-old man passed away, leaving the doctors puzzled and unnerved. The police investigation revealed that Georg Abendorfer actually lived in Cincinnati, Ohio. He had arrived in Colorado Springs on the 30th of July and had checked into the Park Hotel with 2 other individuals. At the hotel, the investigators learned the names of his companions, Anna Maria Hahn and her 12-year-old son, Oskar. According to the hotel owner, Hahn claimed to live in Cincinnati and was vacationing in Colorado. The officers searched the room Hahn had shared with Abendorfer, but there was no trace of the mother and son or any clue as to their whereabouts. The detectives were left to ponder the relationship between the 2 missing persons and the deceased. Were they related? Was Hahn romantically involved with Abendorfer? Why had they fled so hastily when the man was evidently gravely ill? While the police mulled over these questions, another chilling detail came to light. Trail of diamonds. The same hotel owner they had questioned earlier had recently filed a theft report. Diamond jewelry worth $300 had vanished from the hotel. Was there a connection between the sudden flight of Anna Maria Hahn and the mysterious death of the hotel guests? The investigators initially followed the trail of diamonds, questioning local pawnshops. Their efforts paid off when one owner recalled a woman accompanied by a young boy who had tried to sell jewelry. He had inspected the items but ultimately refused to buy them. The witness description matched the hotel owner's account of Anna Maria Hahn. The Colorado Springs police issued a statewide search for the elusive woman. Soon after, officers in Denver reported that a woman fitting the description had tried to withdraw $1,000 from a bank account under Georg Abendorfer's name. She claimed to be his wife, but the bank employee grew suspicious and refused the transaction. Web of lies. The detectives managed to obtain an arrest warrant for Anna Maria Hahn, initially only for the theft of jewelry from the hotel. Suspecting she might return to Cincinnati, they alerted the local authorities. Their tip proved to be spot on. The Cincinnati police found Anna Maria Hahn in her apartment and arrested her immediately. During her first interrogation, the officers questioned Hahn about her relationship with the late George Abendorfer. She claimed never to have met the man. The detectives then asked how it was possible that she had registered her own name, her son's, and Abendorfer's at the hotel using her handwriting. Caught in her lie, Hahn changed her story, stating she met the man on the train from Denver to Colorado Springs. He was a Swiss man suffering from nausea, and she had taken pity on him. The police remained skeptical, as Abendorfer was also known to be from Cincinnati. They continued to doubt whether Anna Maria Hahn was telling the truth this time about when and where she had met the deceased man. A date with death. The questioning of acquaintances and relatives of the deceased finally shed some light on the matter. Abendorfer had immigrated to the United States from Russia in 1892. He was a shoemaker by profession, but had since retired. He had recently separated from his wife, and they had 3 sons together. The relatives could not understand why he had died so suddenly. The last time they had seen him, he was in excellent health. Further investigations revealed that Anna Hahn had met with the deceased multiple times in Cincinnati. They had even gone out together. According to a relative of Abendorfer, the trip to Colorado was actually the idea of his new acquaintance. She claimed to own a ranch in Colorado Springs that she wanted to show him. The investigators confronted the suspect with these statements. At last, Anna Maria Hahn admitted to knowing Abendorfer before the trip. She claimed to have met him for the first time a few weeks earlier at a shoe store. However, she continued to deny having a relationship with him. A chance encounter? Hahn insisted that they had not planned the trip together. She had merely encountered him by chance on the train. As it turned out, they had been heading to the same destination. According to Hahn, they got along well during the train ride, and had spontaneously decided to share a hotel room in Colorado Springs to save money. However, shortly after arriving at the hotel, Abendorfer had suddenly fallen ill and sought medical attention at the hospital. Hahn claimed to have had no contact with him afterward. The woman had already lied twice. Why would she suddenly tell the full truth now? The investigators remained skeptical. They decided to take a closer look at Anna Maria Hahn's living circumstances to gain a better understanding. Disgrace in Allgäu. The woman originally hailed from Germany, born as Anna Maria Filser on July 7, 1906, in the Bavarian town of Füssen. She was the youngest of 12 children of a furniture manufacturer, 3 of whom died in childhood, and 2 who fell as soldiers in World War I. As a little girl, she spent 5 months in a hospital due to blood poisoning. Shortly thereafter, she underwent surgery on her thyroid. As a teenager, she dropped out of school before completing her education. She often sneaked out of her parents' house at night to party with friends. Her parents eventually sent her to live with an older sister in Holland, hoping that she would come to her senses in the unfamiliar environment. But then, at 18 years old, Anna Filser gave birth to a child. The father of the boy was unknown. In the eyes of her family at the time, their daughter had brought shame upon them. Her parents considered sending Anna Filser to Cincinnati, USA, where her uncle and aunt lived. However, their plan was not easily implemented. The US had tightened its immigration laws in 1924, and their daughter had to wait several years for a visa. Scarlet fever and a fabricated doctor. On January 31, 1929, she boarded the SS München in Bremen and arrived in New York on February 10, 1929. In the US, Anna Hahn later claimed that she had fallen in love with a doctor from Vienna years before her departure. Their son Oskar was born from this relationship. Supposedly, she had married the doctor just before leaving Europe. Her husband then died shortly after their arrival in Cincinnati. This story is likely mostly fabricated. In the passenger list of the SS München, Anna Maria Hahn is listed under her maiden name, Anna Filser. There is no mention of a husband, nor an entry for her son, who initially stayed with his grandparents. Only her uncle, Max Doskel, is mentioned as her destination, residing at the address 3540 Evanston Avenue in Cincinnati. Shortly after her arrival in Ohio, Anna Filser fell ill with scarlet fever. Did the 3 weeks of medical treatment give her new ideas? At least, she claimed shortly after that she was a trained nurse. Among others, she told this lie to the retired banker Charles Oswald, 71, who allowed her to move in with him to help him with household chores. Marriage proposal. The older gentleman fell in love with the 22-year-old woman and proposed marriage to her. She pretended to accept his advances, but she never intended to marry him. Instead, she stole from him. During this time, she also placed her first horse bet, with a $2 stake. She won $260. This success likely encouraged her to try her luck with betting more frequently in the future. In the spring of 1929, she landed a job as a chambermaid at the Hotel Alms in Cincinnati. That summer, at a dance event, she met her future husband Philip Hahn. The couple married just under a year later, on May 3, 1930, in Buffalo, New York. In July of the same year, Charles Oswald transferred $700 to Anna Hahn's account and handed her 27 shares of Union Gas and Electric, which she sold 6 months later. It is unclear whether Oswald genuinely gave her this gift voluntarily or if Anna Hahn somehow helped the situation. Oswald passed away on August 14, 1935, and left his entire estate to his former housekeeper. However, at that point, no inheritance remained, possibly because Anna Hahn had already taken all the valuable items for herself. Reunited with her son. In the fall of 1930, Anna Hahn traveled to Germany to bring her son back with her. On November 3, 1930, she returned to New York aboard the SS Stuttgart. The corresponding passenger list mentions an Anna Hahn, 24, from Füssen and her 5-year-old son Oskar Filser, the latter born in Munich. According to the document, Anna Hahn is now married to Philip Hahn from Cincinnati, who is also listed as the child's father. It is almost certain that Oskar is not Philip Hahn's biological son, but he was probably legitimized upon marriage, as it used to be called. Anna Hahn's uncle in Cincinnati passed away and left her a house at 2970 Coleraine Avenue. In February 1931, he had drawn up a new will, bequeathing his entire estate to his beloved niece Anna Filser Hahn, despite having his own biological children. Disenchantment. Philip Hahn worked as a telegraph operator but had grown weary of his job. The couple pooled their savings and opened 2 delicatessens in 1932. Both partners managed one of the shops each. On the surface, the two led a solid marriage. But in truth, their relationship was already troubled at an early stage. Anna Hahn was dissatisfied with her role in the associated work. Moreover, the businesses were not doing well. There had to be easier ways to make money. Arson seemed like a suitable solution to escape the dilemma from her perspective. She set the first fire in one of the 2 business branches at 3007 Coleraine Avenue. Although the fire caused little damage, Anna Hahn received $300 from the insurance company. The subsequent fires broke out in the family home, the first on June 2, 1935, and the second on May 20, 1936. For both fires combined, Anna Hahn collected compensation of $2,000. Life insurance. However, the arsonist may have had other ideas in mind to get her hands on large sums of money. In 1935 and 1936, she twice tried to persuade her husband to take out a life insurance policy in her favor with coverage of $10,000 and $5,000, respectively, the latter attempt being successful. Philip Hahn fell seriously ill shortly afterward. Against his wife's wishes, Hahn's mother took her son to the hospital. There, doctors managed to save his life without determining the cause of the illness. The marriage was more troubled than ever after this incident, and the couple eventually separated. After separating from her husband, Anna Hahn worked as a home nurse for elderly people, although she had no education or professional experience in this field. For the investigators, this was an interesting starting point. They researched what had happened to Anna Hahn's patients. Heart failure. One of her charges was 78-year-old Jacob Wagner, who had died under mysterious circumstances 2 months earlier. The German immigrant had formerly worked as a gardener and had bequeathed his entire estate to Anna Hahn in his will. The attending physician had listed heart failure as the cause of death on the death certificate. The investigators asked around in Jacob Wagner's neighborhood. The neighbors reported that Anna Maria Hahn had shown up one day and tried to convince the older man that she was a long-lost niece of his. Although the man did not buy her story, he eventually let her wrap him around her finger. He accepted her help when she said she wanted to take care of the daily household tasks. The neighbors also testified that Hahn had spent several hours in Wagner's apartment after he had already passed away. Cold-blooded. The officers also got to know Olive Luella Kohler, an elderly woman living in the same building as Jacob Wagner. She told them that Hahn had befriended her as well and had brought her ice cream cones twice. However, after eating the second ice cream cone, she suddenly felt extremely nauseous and had to be taken to the hospital. During her stay at the hospital, someone broke into her apartment and stole a bag in which she kept cash and jewelry. The description of this incident aroused the officers' suspicions once again. As a result, the police applied for the exhumation of Jacob Wagner's body. Perhaps there would be evidence that he had not died of natural causes but had been helped along with poison, such as by his self-proclaimed caretaker, Anna Hahn. Arsenic and old lace. The press caught wind of the investigation. Several newspaper articles were published about Hahn, claiming she had likely poisoned multiple elderly patients. These early articles contained many inaccuracies and unconfirmed rumors. However, they led to more witnesses coming forward to the police with promising information. Among them was 62-year-old George Hayes, who approached the investigators. He stated that he had met Anna Hahn a year earlier. At first, they got along well and spent some time together. But then, he fell ill after drinking a glass of beer that Anna Hahn had poured for him. From that point on, he had become suspicious of her, but it was only through reading the newspaper that he saw his suspicions confirmed. The Croton Oil. The police learned of another deceased person with whom Anna Hahn had been in contact immediately before his death. Just 2 weeks before Hahn's trip to Colorado, 67-year-old George Zellman died in his apartment at 1717 Elm Street. Witnesses had observed Anna Hahn visiting him. Shortly afterward, he had fallen ill, and soon after, he was dead. Investigators obtained permission to exhume and autopsy his body as well. The pathologist discovered traces of poison in the deceased's body. His initial suspicion was arsenic. However, upon further testing, it was revealed that the substance was Croton Oil. This medicine was extremely popular in the second half of the 19th century and had been commonly used in many households. For example, the oil was applied to the skin to alleviate the pain of rheumatism, gout, or inflammation. When taken internally, the medicine served as a laxative. From today's perspective, Croton Oil is considered at least questionable due to its increased risk of tumor formation. But even back then, it was known that the remedy should only be administered in small doses. Giving too large a quantity could lead to unpleasant side effects or even death. Philip Hahn handed the police a bottle of Croton Oil that he had taken from his wife when they still lived together. Being suspicious of his wife, he had conducted his own research. After learning about the possible risks, he had hidden the medication from his wife. A pharmacist later confirmed that Anna Hahn had purchased a bottle of Croton Oil from him on July 20, 1936. Promissory note and arsenic. During the search of Anna Hahn's apartment, investigators found a promissory note for $2,000. The loan had been granted to her by a man named Albert Palmer. The 72-year-old man was registered at 2416 Central Parkway. When the officers wanted to question him, they learned that he had already died on March 26, 1937, after being sick for an extended period. Relatives also stated that Anna Hahn had taken care of him before his death. Additionally, at least $4,000 in cash was missing from his possessions. At the same time, investigators received the autopsy results for Jacob Wagner. His body also showed a high concentration of poison. However, in his case, it was not Croton Oil, but arsenic. The same poison was found in George Abendorfer's body when it was examined more closely. Questioning his son. The police decided to question Anna Hahn's son, Oskar. He had nothing to say about his mother's patients. However, he provided the officers with an interesting detail in the case of George Abendorfer. According to his statement, his mother had purchased the ticket for Abendorfer at Cincinnati Union Terminal, the city's main train station. Anna Hahn had lied once again. Furthermore, the boy told the investigators that his mother had given Abendorfer drinks several times during the trip, and that the old man had already complained of nausea before the train reached Colorado. By now, the authorities in Cincinnati had gathered a lot of circumstantial evidence against the suspect. The arrest warrant on which they had originally arrested the woman, however, came from Colorado. But the police authorities in Ohio were not willing to extradite Anna Hahn to Colorado Springs, because there, she was only facing a theft charge. In Cincinnati, it was about multiple murders. The trial. To prevent extradition to Colorado, the Cincinnati police initially charged Anna Hahn with the murder of Jacob Wagner. District Attorneys Dudley Alcold, Loyal Martin, and Simon Lays were responsible for the case. The defense was represented by Joseph H. Hooden and Hiram Bosinger Sr. The trial began on October 11, 1937. Judge Charles S. Bell presided over the court. The jury consisted of 11 women and 1 man. The prosecution cited greed as the motive for murder. Anna Hahn was after the victim's money and possessions. The prosecutors called numerous witnesses. According to an expert, there was enough arsenic in the body to kill 4 men. A handwriting expert testified that the signature on Jacob Wagner's will was forged. Moreover, according to the graphologist, the signature matched Anna Hahn's handwriting. The prosecution scored a significant success when the judge allowed evidence from other cases not part of the actual trial to be introduced. The prosecution was able to demonstrate that Anna Hahn followed a pattern of crime. As a result of the judge's decision, George Hayes took the stand, who had survived an alleged murder attempt. On October 29, 1937, the prosecution concluded its presentation of evidence. Cold-blooded. The defense had few witnesses or evidence to present. They called Anna Hahn to the stand to defend herself against the charges. She performed unexpectedly well during cross-examination. The prosecutor could not entangle her in any further contradictions or prove false statements. In his closing argument, prosecutor Dudley Allgäu used the defendant's apparent composure in court against her. She is as cold-blooded as any woman in the world. For no one could attend 4 weeks of trial and show no emotion in the face of the overwhelming evidence. She is heartless because no one with a heart could have dealt with these men this way. We have seen the coldest, most heartless person we have ever encountered in our lives. The jury needed only 2 hours for their deliberations. They found the defendant guilty of the murder of Jacob Wagner. The legally decisive aspect was the phrase "without recommendation of mercy." According to the laws of the time, this automatically led to the death penalty in the case of murder. The jury had thus sentenced the first woman to death in the state of Ohio. Execution. On November 10, 1937, Judge Bell confirmed the verdict and announced that the perpetrator would have to be executed by electric chair by March 10, 1938. However, Anna Hahn's defense attorneys filed numerous petitions and appeals, making it impossible to keep the execution date. Eventually, the appeal reached the Supreme Court of the United States, which denied the request. The verdict was now legally valid. The execution date was set for December 7, 1938, at 8 p.m. On the appointed day, Anna Maria Hahn wrote 4 letters that she handed over to her attorneys. The execution began promptly at 8 p.m. At 8:13 p.m., the prison doctor officially pronounced Anna Hahn dead. The body was buried at Holy Cross Catholic Cemetery in Columbus, Ohio. 4 letters. On December 17, 1938, Hahn's defense attorney Joseph H. Hooden announced that he had sold the 4 letters of the executed offender to the daily newspaper Cincinnati Enquirer. The proceeds were to go to a fund benefiting her son, Oskar. 2 days later, the newspaper published the letters. In the letters, Anna Maria Hahn confessed to all the murders the police had suspected her of. She also elaborated on the motives for her crimes, although one should be cautious in taking her every word at face value. The overall picture was as follows: Anna Hahn and her husband faced severe financial problems. It's not surprising, considering they opened 2 delicatessens during the largest economic crisis in world history. She initially turned everything she could into money, but eventually, those resources were exhausted. By then, Anna Hahn was driven by concrete fears for her existence. In the letters, she repeatedly claimed to have been primarily concerned about her son and his future. However, this woman does not seem to have been entirely selfless. Horse betting. The situation worsened when banks threatened to foreclose on her inherited house. I signed some documents for my husband, and because I had signed the documents, they threatened to take away the house on Coleraine Avenue, sell the house over my head, and throw me and my boy out on the street. That's when I started betting and gambling on horse races. I wanted to make some money for my boy. As mentioned earlier, she had placed her first horse bet in 1930. It is possible that she was already addicted to gambling and only had her child's welfare in mind as a secondary concern. During one of her trips to the racetrack, she met Albert Palmer. Over time, the two became closer, and Anna Hahn borrowed money from Palmer for her bets. I paid most of it back. But when I didn't repay my debts quickly enough for his taste, he demanded that I become his girlfriend. He threatened to sick his lawyer on me for the debts if I didn't do what he wanted. God knows I didn't want to kill him. And I don't know what it was that planted such a thought in my brain. I remembered that there was rat poison in the basement. Something in my head told me, give him a little bit of it, and he won't bother you anymore. I don't know what made me do it, but I put some of the poison in the oysters. A short time later, she learned from Palmer's relatives that he had fallen ill and was hospitalized. I visited him as soon as I could. He was very nice to me. He told me he was sorry for how he had treated me. I prayed for him to get well. No one knows what was going through my mind. I told the nurses and doctors to do everything they could to make him well again. But on Maundy Thursday, Mr. Palmer died. Only I know why. Distorted perception? Anna Hahn also seemed intent on revising the image the public had formed of her during the trial. When I stood next to Mr. Wagner's body in the funeral home, I wanted to scream out loud. I didn't do it. I couldn't believe what I had done. I can't believe it even today. I couldn't believe it when all those people entered the courtroom and told the jurors how these men had died. I sat there thinking I was hearing a story about another person. So, was Anna Maria Hahn not the cold-hearted murderer the prosecutor claimed she was? Well, her credibility suffers considering the fact that she was not just a murderer, but a serial killer. She had not only killed Albert Palmer out of desperation. When she seemed to get away with it, she deliberately sought out more victims and sent them to their graves as quickly as possible. This approach suggests less remorse and more cold-bloodedness. Oskar. Investigators were relieved, at least. She had confessed to all the crimes that were not tried in court and were now considered solved. The police had been right in their suspicions. In this sense, the letters brought certainty to the authorities and, above all, the relatives of the deceased about the fate that had befallen them. Anna Hahn's son Oskar was 12 years old when his mother died in the electric chair. The authorities placed him with a foster family in the Midwest. The newspaper Cincinnati Enquirer kept his promise and paid for the boy's education. His new name and exact whereabouts were never made public. It is only known that he led an unremarkable life and served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. Victims. March 26, 1937, Albert J. Palmer, 72, mistakenly referred to as Albert Parker in Wikipedia and other sources. June 3, 1937, Jacob Wagner, 78, July 6, 1937, George Gzelman, 67, August 1, 1937, Johann Georg Abendorfer, 67. There are more potential victims. However, in her letters, Anna Hahn either explicitly denied having committed these other crimes or didn't address them at all. This includes the previously mentioned cases of George Hayes and Olive Kohler, both of whom survived. A similar fate probably befell Stina Cable, who met the murderer on July 15, 1936, in the ladies' restroom of a bar. Anna Hahn invited her for a beer. According to Cable, Hahn put poison in her drink. After that, she was sick for a year. Additionally, Hahn allegedly stole $800 from her. But Cable survived. Ernest Kohler, 62, was less fortunate. Kohler had rented space to the Hahns when they opened their business in 1932. On May 6, 1933, the man passed away, officially due to cancer. He bequeathed his property to Anna Hahn. For this reason, there was suspicion that she could have poisoned him. However, the crime could not be proven at the time of the investigation. Kohler's body was interred in a crematorium, and Anna Hahn took possession of the urn containing his ashes. I'm Jonathan. There are many more scary stories I will tell you. Like and subscribe my channel. Or there is another scary story I can tell.